The most famous time machine car from Back to the Future, the DeLorean, was actually built by a drug dealer. Yes, you heard that right. John DeLorean was a criminal who fooled all of America. Or maybe America fooled him. That is for you to decide by the end of this video. Let's go back, all the way back to 1925, Detroit, Michigan, a small, broken house in a poor neighborhood. A boy is born, John Zachary DeLorean. His father is an alcoholic who barely stays home. His mother works multiple jobs just to keep the family alive. There is no money. There is no future. There is nothing except struggle. But this boy, this skinny, quiet boy, he has something in his eyes that nobody else around him has. Every time a car passes on the street outside his window, he stops everything. He watches it. He studies it. While other kids are playing, John DeLorean is lying on the floor, taking apart whatever mechanical thing he can find, just to understand how it works. His neighbors think he is strange. His teachers think he is distracted, but John knows exactly what he is doing. He is preparing. He just does not know for what yet. Fast forward to the 1950s. John has studied engineering. He has worked hard. And then comes the moment that changes everything. General Motors calls. GM, the biggest car company in the world at that time. The place where the best automotive minds in America work. John walks through those doors as a young engineer, and from day one, everybody knows he is different. He does not just follow orders. He does not just draw what he is told to draw. He questions everything. He challenges everything. His bosses find him difficult. His colleagues find him brilliant. And then in 1964, John DeLorean does something that nobody in the automotive world expects. He creates the Pontiac GTO. Now, if you don't know what that means, let me explain. Before the GTO, cars were either powerful or affordable. Never both. Big engines went into big, expensive cars. Regular people drove boring, slow cars. John DeLorean changed that equation completely. He took a powerful V8 engine and put it into a mid-size, affordable car. The result was a car that could go 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.6 seconds, which in 1964 was absolutely insane. People went crazy. Young Americans who could never afford a muscle car suddenly had one. The GTO became a cultural phenomenon. It became a symbol of freedom, of youth, of power. Songs were written about it, movies featured it, and John DeLorean became the most talked-about engineer in America. GM promoted him, then promoted him again. By the early 1970s, John DeLorean was one of the youngest executives in GM history. He was making enormous amounts of money. He was famous. He was on magazine covers. He married a supermodel. He was living the American dream at its absolute peak, and then he walked away from all of it. In 1973, John DeLorean resigned from General Motors. He was 48 years old. He had a guaranteed future at the most powerful car company in the world, and he quit. Everyone thought he had lost his mind. His colleagues tried to talk him out of it. His friends warned him. But John had made his decision, because John DeLorean did not want to build someone else's dream anymore. He wanted to build his own. He sat down and designed a car, not just any car. A car that would be unlike anything the world had ever seen. He wanted stainless steel body panels, not painted metal like every other car, actual brushed stainless steel that would never rust and would shine differently in every light. He wanted gull-wing doors, doors that opened upward like wings, like a spaceship, like something from another century. He wanted a mid-engine rear-wheel drive layout for perfect balance and performance, and he wanted the design to look like the future itself had arrived on wheels. He called it the DMC-12. DeLorean Motor Company's first car. His car. Now he needed a place to build it, and here is where the story gets very interesting. John DeLorean chose Belfast, Northern Ireland. Why Belfast? Because in the late 1970s, Belfast was one of the most troubled cities in the world. The Troubles, the conflict between different political and religious groups, had devastated the local economy. Unemployment was massive. The British government was desperate to bring investment and jobs to Northern Ireland. So they offered DeLorean a deal: come here, build your factory, and we will give you significant government subsidies. Millions of pounds to help you get started. DeLorean said yes. Construction of the Dunmurry factory began in 1978. Hundreds of local workers were hired. Thousands more were promised jobs once full production started. For Belfast, a city that had known mostly pain and conflict, this factory was a symbol of hope. John DeLorean was not just building a car, he was building a future for thousands of families. In 1981, the first DeLorean DMC-12 rolled off the production line, and it was extraordinary. When people saw it for the first time, they stopped walking. That stainless steel body caught the light in a way no other car did. It did not look like a car from 1981. It looked like a car from 2050. The gull-wing doors opened upward with a smooth mechanical elegance that made people gasp. The interior was black leather and brushed aluminum. The car sat low to the ground, wide and confident. It had a 2.85-liter PRV V6 engine producing around 130 horsepower. Not the most powerful car in the world, but more than enough to move that beautiful machine with authority. The price was $25,000, which is roughly $80,000 in today's money. And despite that price, orders were coming in from across America. John DeLorean's dream was becoming real. But underneath the surface, problems were building, and they were building fast. 1981 was also the beginning of a severe American recession. Interest rates were at historic highs. Unemployment was rising. Consumer confidence was collapsing. People who had ordered DeLoreans were canceling their orders. Dealerships that had been excited about the car were now struggling to sell them. The factory in Belfast was producing cars, but they were sitting in lots unsold. Cash flow dried up. Investors started pulling back. The debt that DeLorean Motor Company had taken on to build the factory and launch the car was becoming impossible to manage. John DeLorean was watching his dream drown in slow motion. He tried everything. He sought new investors. He negotiated with banks. He pleaded with the British government for more support. He restructured the company multiple times. He worked day and night, but the recession was merciless and the numbers kept getting worse. By mid-1982, DeLorean Motor Company needed approximately $17 million just to survive the next few months. John DeLorean was desperate, truly, genuinely desperate. The kind of desperate where a person stops thinking clearly. The kind of desperate where a person will listen to anyone who offers a solution. And that is exactly when James Hoffman appeared. James Hoffman was an old acquaintance of DeLorean's, a man with a complicated background and an even more complicated present. What John DeLorean did not know, what he could not have known, was that James Hoffman was a convicted drug smuggler who had become a paid FBI informant. Meaning the FBI was paying him to find targets, build cases, and deliver arrests. Hoffman contacted DeLorean and told him he knew a way to make the money needed to save the company. A cocaine deal. Colombian cocaine, $24 million worth. The profit from the deal would rescue DeLorean Motor Company and save thousands of jobs. Now here is what you need to understand about this moment. Was John DeLorean a drug trafficker? Was he some cartel connection? No. He was a car engineer from Detroit who had never had any involvement in drugs. But he was also a man who was watching everything he had built, his company, his dream, the jobs of thousands of Belfast workers, collapse in front of him. And someone came to him with what seemed like a lifeline. He made a catastrophically bad decision. On October 18, 1982, John DeLorean met with Hoffman and undercover FBI agents in a hotel room in Los Angeles. Hidden cameras were rolling. The agents presented bags containing cocaine. John DeLorean held one of the bags. He said the now famous words, "It's better than gold." He agreed to participate in the deal. The next morning, October 19, 1982, FBI agents arrested John Zachary DeLorean. Charges: drug trafficking, conspiracy to distribute $24 million worth of cocaine. The news exploded across the world. Every newspaper, every television channel, every radio station carried the story. The man who had built the car of the future, the visionary engineer, the American dream personified, arrested for drugs. People were stunned, shocked. And for most people, the immediate conclusion was simple: he was guilty. He was caught on camera. There was video evidence. What more did you need? 2 weeks later, exactly 2 weeks after his arrest, DeLorean Motor Company officially went into receivership. Bankrupt. The Belfast factory shut down. Around 2,500 workers lost their jobs immediately. Families who had depended on that factory for their income suddenly had nothing. The dream that DeLorean had sold to Belfast, the hope he had promised, was gone. And the man who had promised it was in handcuffs in Los Angeles. Approximately 9,000 DeLorean cars had been built. Production was over forever, but the story was not over, not even close. In 1984, John DeLorean went to trial. And what happened in that courtroom over the following months became one of the most remarkable legal cases in American history. DeLorean's defense team built their entire case around a single word: entrapment. They argued that the government had not caught a drug dealer. They had created one. James Hoffman, the FBI's own informant, had approached DeLorean. Hoffman had pitched the drug deal. Hoffman had convinced a desperate man that this was his only option. Hoffman had arranged the meetings. Hoffman had orchestrated every single step of the operation. And crucially, Hoffman had done all of this while being paid by the FBI to do exactly this. The defense showed the jury something else too. They showed them James Hoffman's own criminal history. This was a man who had been convicted of drug offenses himself. A man who had lied to authorities multiple times. A man whose credibility was so questionable that even the prosecutors knew he was a problem witness. The FBI had used a deeply unreliable, self-serving criminal to set up John DeLorean, and then they had presented that setup as a legitimate drug bust. The jury listened. They watched the tapes. They considered everything. And on August 16, 1984, they returned their verdict: not guilty, on every single charge. The judge in the case was openly critical of the government's conduct. Legal scholars wrote about the case for years afterward. It became a defining example of entrapment, the legal principle that says the government cannot manufacture a crime and then punish someone for committing it. John DeLorean walked out of that courthouse a free man, but freedom did not give him back what he had lost. The company was gone. The factory was gone. The money was gone. His reputation, though legally cleared, had been permanently stained in the public imagination. Most people remembered the arrest. Few people followed the acquittal closely enough. Now here is the twist that almost nobody knows, and I mean almost nobody. While John DeLorean was being arrested in October 1982, while his world was ending, in Hollywood, a director named Robert Zemeckis was working on a screenplay about time travel. The script called for a time machine, and the time machine needed to be a vehicle, something memorable, something iconic, something that looked like it did not belong to the present time. The production team looked at many options. They considered a refrigerator at one point. They considered a modified van. And then someone suggested the DeLorean DMC-12. They brought one in. They looked at it, and the decision was immediate. That stainless steel body, those gull-wing doors that opened like wings, the way it sat so low and wide and confident on the road. It did not look like a 1982 car. It looked like something that had arrived from another era. It was perfect. In 1985, Back to the Future was released. And the DeLorean DMC-12, a car whose company had been bankrupt for 2 years, a car that was no longer in production, a car that most people associated with scandal and failure, became the most famous car in cinema history. Every child who watched Marty McFly climb into that gull-wing door wanted a DeLorean. Every adult who saw those stainless steel panels gleam under the movie lights suddenly remembered what an extraordinary machine it was. The film ran in cinemas for months. Then it went to home video. Then sequels came. Back to the Future Part II and Part III. The DeLorean appeared in all 3 films, and each time it appeared, another generation fell in love with it. John DeLorean was alive to see all of this. He watched his car become immortal on the big screen. He watched the world celebrate a machine he had created. And he could not participate in any of it commercially. The company was gone. He received no royalties from the film's use of his car. He watched from the outside. The cruelty of that situation is almost impossible to describe. Now let's talk about where those cars are today, because this is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Of the approximately 9,000 DeLorean DMC-12s that were built, an estimated 6,500 are believed to still exist today. Think about that. A car that was built between 1981 and 1983. A car that went through one of the most damaging public scandals in automotive history, and yet the majority of them survived, because people loved them enough to keep them, to restore them, to preserve them. Today, a DeLorean in good condition sells for between $35,000 and $55,000. A DeLorean in excellent, fully restored condition can sell for $80,000 to $100,000. Special low-mileage examples have sold for significantly more at auction. For a car that was considered a commercial failure when it was produced, these are remarkable numbers. There are DeLorean owners clubs across America, in the UK, in Europe, in Australia. People who have dedicated years and significant amounts of money to maintaining these cars. There are specialist mechanics who work exclusively on DeLoreans. There are companies that manufacture replacement parts so that these cars can continue to run. And then in 1995, something unexpected happened. A man named Stephen Wynn, a British mechanic living in America who had spent years working on DeLoreans, purchased the remaining assets of the original DeLorean Motor Company. The name, the parts inventory, the intellectual property. He set up a new DeLorean Motor Company in Humble, Texas. This company does not manufacture new cars. It exists to supply parts and service to existing DeLorean owners. But the name lives on. The company technically still exists. And in more recent years, there have been serious discussions and announcements about a new DeLorean, a modern interpretation, electric powertrain. The same iconic silhouette but built with contemporary technology. In 2022 and 2023, prototype images were released. The automotive world paid attention. Whether a full production version ever becomes reality remains to be seen. But the fact that people are trying, the fact that investors believe in that nameplate enough to pursue it, tells you everything about the power of what John DeLorean created. John DeLorean himself died on March 19, 2005. He was 80 years old. In his final years, he was essentially broke. Multiple business ventures after the trial had failed. He had filed for personal bankruptcy. The man who had once been one of the most powerful figures in the American automotive industry died with very little to his name financially. He had spent his final decades trying to revive various projects, none of which succeeded. But here is what he left behind. He left behind a car that the entire world recognizes instantly. A car that has appeared in films, television shows, video games, and popular culture for 4 decades. A car that people stop on the street to photograph when they see one. A car that makes grown adults feel like children watching Back to the Future for the first time. He left behind the Pontiac GTO, the car that invented the muscle car segment and changed American automotive culture permanently. He left behind a legal case, his own acquittal that became a landmark in American jurisprudence and is still studied in law schools today. And he left behind a story. A story about a boy from a poor neighborhood in Detroit who dared to dream bigger than anyone around him thought was reasonable, who built something that the world had never seen, who was brought down by a combination of terrible timing, desperate decisions, and a government operation that a court of law ultimately declared to be outrageous conduct. Was John DeLorean a perfect man? No. The decision he made in that hotel room in October 1982, even if it was the product of entrapment, even if a jury acquitted him, was still a catastrophically bad decision made by a man who should have known better. History does not erase that. But was he simply a criminal? Was he the drug dealer that those October 1982 headlines suggested? A jury of his peers said no. A judge said the government's behavior was outrageous. The full picture, the desperation, the manipulation, the FBI's own unreliable informant, is far more complicated than any headline could capture. What remains 4 decades later is that stainless steel machine, those gull-wing doors, that unmistakable silhouette. Somewhere in America right now, someone is in their garage, carefully polishing a DeLorean DMC-12, checking the engine, making sure those gull-wing doors open smoothly, getting it ready for a weekend drive or a car show. And when they open those doors and slide into that black leather interior, they are not just sitting in a car. They are sitting in the physical proof that one man's dream was real, that it existed, that it was extraordinary. John DeLorean built the future. The future arrived too early in the wrong economy, surrounded by the wrong people at the wrong moment. But it arrived, and it is still here. Comment below just one word, DeLorean, if you want more stories like this. Stories that Google won't tell you. Stories that are stranger than fiction because they actually happened. And if you know someone who still thinks DeLorean was guilty, send them this video. Let's see what they say after watching it.